Hello, and welcome to My Favorite Games, a podcast for game designers to geek out about games they like to play. Today, I'm super excited to host Jamey Stegmaier. Jamey is the co-founder and lead designer at Stonemaier Games, and is designer of Viticulture, Euphoria, Scythe, Charterstone, Rolling Realms, and so much more. He's also an author, or the author of A Crowdfunder's Strategy Guide, a book about crowdfunding, entrepreneurship, and the importance of growing your community. Jamey, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm really excited to chat about. I love chatting about my favorite things. So let's chat about favorite things today. Yeah.
I know I sent you a bunch of questions beforehand, and it's going to be a bit of a struggle to get through them. But before we get into talking a bit about your games, but also just your views on the industry, the game you brought today to the kind of figurative desert island is the Quacks of Quedlinburg. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what is it, and why do you love it so much?
Yeah, this is a game that has showed up on many of my top 10 lists, including my most recent favorite games of all time top 10 list. It is a push your luck bag building game where over the course of it's either 9 or 10 rounds, you're acquiring tokens, you're putting them in a bag, and then you're brewing a potion with those tokens, trying to decide when to stop pulling tokens out of your bag. And when you stop determines if you bust or not. If you bust, you'll gain either resources to buy more tokens or points. And if you don't bust, you get the points and you get the resources to buy more tokens, which I think is a nice balancing act for a push your luck game like this. But it's a game that I've played in all different player counts. I played all the expansions, but I still really love the base game. And it's the type of game whenever someone mentions it, I get excited to play it. Have you played it?
I have not actually, and
Okay.
I was reading about it a bit about it, but like why? But there are other push your luck games. There are other
Mhm.
there are other games that are similar. In terms of at least on the surface level, when you're taking a look at it, what about it gets you going?
Well, I do like the theme. I like the theme of brewing potions, but I think it's probably the
Yeah.
combination of three different things where if the game only had two of these things, it probably wouldn't work as well. But it's simultaneous, so all players are doing something at the same time, so there's very little downtime. Um, there's that combined with the push your luck, which I think is done well in this game, particularly due to what I just illustrated in that even if you do push too far, you're still getting something out of it. You're not completely wasting a turn or a round in the game. And then the third element is the engine building. I love games that have a sense of progression to them where you feel stronger, more powerful at the end of the game than at the beginning. And in this game, there's a strong sense of engine building to it. I think the combination of all three of those factors comes together to make the game really fun every time I get to the table.
And when did you first kind of discover it?
Ooh, time is difficult now with the pandemic. I think it was around 5 or 6 years ago. It was
Okay.
roughly around when the game was released, and I've slowly kind of tried all the different expansions since then. But it's one of the signs to me of a game that I really love is when I still am happy to play the base game, just the core game, without any of that expansion content, and that is the case for Quacks.
There's a lot of difference in opinion when different games approach expansions in different ways. How do you think they approached it with you're calling it the Quacks? How do they approach that? Like, was there anything special about that? Anything remarkably elegant about the expansions and their kind of mentality when trying to design them?
That's a good question. I think they poked at a few different buttons with the expansions. There's some that just add more variety because in Quacks there are every time you play you use tiles to define how the benefits that you gain from each token, and so there's a lot of variety in the game there. So one of the expansions, or I think multiple expansions, add new tiles that expand those abilities. One of the other expansions kind of dives deeper into this theme of brewing a potion. Like, why are you brewing this potion? What are you doing with it? And the answer in this expansion is you are using the potion to heal some of the people of the town. So some of the people of the town show up in the game, and you're trying to help those people. And there's one other element that helps you if you like go too far. If you're doing too well in the game, the expansion actually gives you ways to still feel good as you are going too far in the game. I think that's fine. But I think for the most part, I look for more variety in expansions. I like to just shuffle in stuff and go. And so that is my preferred style. But I understand that some people want to go deeper into the theme or the other elements like that. Yeah.
As someone who is obviously an established designer, and obviously and publisher, when you experience, because you discovered this after you had become established. What kinds of games, like when you approach games from a play perspective rather than looking at it from maybe a business perspective or publishing perspective or design perspective, has what you look for changed?
As a player,
Yeah, as a
yeah,
player, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Or do
yeah.
you see games, or do you see games that you enjoy playing in a slightly different way than you might have before?
That's a good question because it's really hard for me to separate those two elements myself. I'm always both a designer and a player. I think the choice as to what game that I asked like my friends or my partner to get to the table, that is often different. So the choice there is either I'm getting the game to the table for the first time because I want to play it as a designer, I want to learn from it, or do I want to get to a game to the table because I just really like it and I love it and I want to get it back to the table. And I from that perspective, I think I've given myself freedom over the years to acknowledge that side of myself that there are certain times where I just want to play a game that I know and that I love. I don't always want to be discovering some new mechanism, whether it's for a YouTube video or for myself as a designer. So I think in that element, uh, it, that is when I'm tapping into the gamer side of myself. I'm playing something because I just genuinely want to play it. But the type of game that I pick for that, there's a broad range of those types of games that I get excited to play.
And specifically with Quacks, I don't know. After you experienced it, did it impact your approach to game design at all, or is it really just it's a fun game? It's one that you just enjoy playing and that you respect. Were there elements that you've kind of taken forward?
I have, yeah. There's one very specific element of the game, that element of tiles defining what the tokens do. I really like that. I thought that was a really elegant way of expanding replayability and variety in the game. And so when I visited for the first time the game Libertalia as a designer, as a developer, Libertalia is a game that's been around for around 12 years at this point. We got the rights to it. We decided to make our own version of the game with a designer. And I thought, what, instead of having each token always be the same thing, why don't we use this Quacks mechanism of using tiles to define what these tokens mean in different times. So each side of the board in Libertalia has essentially the tiles printed on them, but we also included the tiles in the game where you can just kind of flip them up in the air and have a random assortment of token abilities, loot abilities when you play. So yeah, that is something that I took directly from Quacks.
I mean, you're very open about a lot of things, like talking about mechanics that you take inspiration from. But ever since you started first, I guess with Euphoria and Viticulture, you've always been very open about your process. As someone who comes from startup world, the whole build in public thing is kind of is quite common. But you've been remarkably open about your experience in building Stonemaier. Like, why? What's the motivation behind that? Because it isn't just a process of, oh yeah, let me just quickly share what I'm doing. Like, it takes a lot of cognitive load and effort in order to make things presentable enough and digestible enough for other people to understand. So what kind of motivates you for being so open?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you kind of acknowledging that there is a lot of time and thought goes into those blog posts, not just writing them, but also trying to reply to all the comments and keep the conversation going, because I love the conversational side of it. It's really two things. One is selfless and one is selfish. The selfless part is that when I create anything, whether it's a YouTube video, a blog post, a game, I'm doing it with the hopes of adding value to other people. That is just important to me. That it feels like the right thing to do. It feels like a good way to spend my time, to add value to other people. That's the selfless part. The selfish part is that I process things best by writing, typically. Also, someone's just talking about it out loud, but writing is really the best way that I process things. That's why I write the articles. And I gain really a lot of value. I gain the value from the conversation that emerges when people want to talk about the topic, when they have opinions to share, whether or not they agree with me. I get a lot of value from that. I learn from that. I learn from what other people want, what they want to see. How can I make myself better, and how can I make Stonemaier Games better, so that I can go back to that original goal of adding value and adding joy to other people. So those two elements, I think they go together. I would almost ask, like, why do you make this podcast? What is your motivation? Do you have a similar selfless reasons for doing so?
I guess yes, both on both hands. Like I'm relatively early in my kind of journey of being a game designer. I've designed games for a long time, but I've never really taken it seriously. And the past couple of years, for a whole bunch of different reasons, I've made a decision to respect the potential to try and make this a thing and not just treat it as some sort of frivolity, right? That I usually would have told myself it was before. And so in order to do that, I know nothing. So getting to talk to really smart people is really, quite selfishly very advantageous. Like I want to ask people the questions that I don't know the answers to, but maybe in the future I would know the answers to. So yeah, it is very selfish in that way. But I feel like then that's a way for us both to maybe benefit from it, or a community of people to benefit from it. I agree. Just a lot of like collaboration, whatever that means, sharing in each other's success. I think that there's I don't know if you're familiar with like control motivated people versus wealth motivated people. It's this book called The Founder's Dilemmas. And wealth motivated people, it's not money, it's wealth of like ideas and figuring out the right way to go. I'm definitely a wealth motivated person. So that means like if someone tells me that what I'm doing is completely full of crap, great. Thank you for telling me, so that I can switch. So naturally, I just enjoy doing that.
And I will highlight, I think that I like that you're doing this publicly. You could have asked for a private conversation about all these same questions, but instead you said, hey, let's have this conversation in a way that other people can join the conversation and have opinions about it. And maybe they're wondering the same questions. I think that's awesome. I think that shows a generosity of spirit when people choose to do that. So I appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you for the affirmation. I appreciate it. A lot of designers that I talk to, I mean, it's remarkable how open a lot of people are about their experience. There is a certain level of guardedness, though, that sometimes people are, maybe not necessarily so willing to talk about or to share, especially when things didn't work. I think it's very in vogue to celebrate failures, but only if you can celebrate them because you've now worked it out versus, shit, I have no idea what's going on. I completely failed and I don't know what to do. I don't know if it's a case of worrying about competition or reputation or what have you, but like, do you think that's quite accurate in the kind of board gaming community, or is that just not, that's not your experience?
Oh, I think that is my experience. I've seen that in other people as well.
It's not just me.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I think the timing element of is interesting. Like when people acknowledge the failure, like, are they doing it in the middle of the failure itself? Are they trying to do it before the failure, which is, I think we're all trying to prevent failure.
Yeah.
Or are they talking about it after the failure, after they've completely solved it? Yeah, I almost think it's interesting to be, for those who are able to talk about it at all three of those stages sometimes. The prevention, the we're in the middle of it, and then at the end, hey, we've tried to solve it at least. Yeah.
So I've been reading your blog quite a bit for inspiration. It's also just come up when I've been doing like research about random other things that I didn't even think you'd be writing about. Like, for example, contracts and agreements. When I was looking up contracts and agreements, I saw a post by you, about that. Are there certain trends or approaches that people take in the board game industry, especially with like collaborating or designing with each other, that you just really don't like? Your contract, I think it was the one that I was looking at, was about artists and not only giving them rights to show off their work, but also just showing you were taking certain opinions about things in those templates, which is great. But are there kind of trends that you see others fall victim to or do that you just really don't like seeing?
There definitely are. I think, fortunately, a few of the ones that come to mind first are things that have trended towards the approach that I do appreciate, which is, for example, the artist. there for a long time, artists did not have their names on the boxes of games. It was hidden in the rule book or maybe on the back of the box, but not on the front. And art is in my opinion, is a huge part of the experience of playing a game. And so I think it's worth acknowledging the artist on the front of the box. And sometimes I think it's things like that people don't do it, not because they don't think the artist doesn't deserve to be on the box, but because they look at every other game on their shelf and they don't see the artist on the box. And so they don't even think to do it. And so right. It takes I think somewhat of a critical mass of people to start to do that. And so I think we've seen that happen. Other things that come to mind are like there's a long unfortunate history of over-sexualization in games, or just showing people who look the same. Maybe there's a bunch of games that have white men on the covers, white medieval men on the covers, and all those trends I think have changed over the years for the better. So I think like the big ones that I entered the industry with having issues with have fortunately trended for the better. So maybe it's a more of a positive answer there, but I'd like to continue those trends in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the subject of credits is surprising. At least maybe someone just coming in fresh. I mean, anybody who has ever play tested any of my games are going to have their name in the box somewhere, right? but it is weird because someone is very happy to help, and then they're kind of tiptoeing around like, would it be possible if I could get a credit on this? And it just seems like this unreasonable expectation that you think like, well, why aren't you just seeing this as a collaboration, in the first instance? But yeah, it is weird that artists' names aren't on the aren't on the cover. Yeah.
Along with the designers too. I just want to say that because it's obvious now, but I still see some games without the designer on the cover. I'm like, what? Someone put so much time and love and energy into this. Why aren't they there? Yeah.
It was made by computer, obviously.
Right.
Which I guess with AI, the whole hullabaloo about AI is a completely another thing. So when you're thinking about new designers, maybe thinking about someone like me, right? What do you think the biggest challenge is that you see new designers struggle with? Like, are there common pitfalls that you just see again and again that you just want to, you want to shake them and just say, just focus, just avoid this area? What comes to your mind?
Yeah, there's two big ones that come to mind in particular. One is I think it's really important to get the idea out of your head and actually onto the table, actually prototype it. I think if you are calling yourself a designer, that means that you are getting something to the table. And so it almost doesn't really apply to this question. But I think I still hear from a lot of designers who have a great idea and they haven't actually played it. They haven't actually prototyped it. I think that part of the process is really important, even though the game probably won't be fun the first time. I've never played a single prototype of my own that was fun the first time I played it, and that's okay. That's part of it. The other side of it is once you get into that and you start to prototype and iterate, I think a common pitfall that I still find with myself, it isn't just new designers, is that it's tough to pull back. You mentioned the word focus. To pull back and all these things that you were really excited to put into the game, some of them may not be working as well as they should, and it is okay to cut them. And I think it's tough to do. The kill your darlings mentality that we have in any sort of creative industry. It's tough to do, and it's tough to do even after you've done it for a long time. I think it was especially tough to do early on for me as a designer, to say, okay, here's this thing that I was fascinated by. This is the reason that I designed the game in the first place. And that one thing happens to be the thing that isn't working. I need to decide to move it, to put it aside, maybe come back to it in another game. That is tough to do. Have you experienced that? The idea of cutting the things that you love?
I'm very, very lucky to have a mentor that comes over every month and just rips all my stuff to share. And it's so valuable. But it's not necessarily if anything's going to be good. It's just different layers of needs work, which is really, really good. And I mean, recently the other week there was a game that I've been working on for a year, like a bit of a year, and I just wasn't hitting it, and it was basically the last chance, and we played through it, and it just wasn't fun. And so it's dead. It's done. Maybe I'll come back to the theme, but that kind of stuff is so freeing when you can do it quickly, when you can get that iteration going, and when you're comfortable with that. Like I love watching people play the games, because as soon as they're not having fun, that's what I'm interested in. And so, like, so what needs cutting, what needs changing, and I guess having someone who understands that can speak with authority, not just this isn't fun, but this isn't fun because of this, and maybe you want to try that. To as an example, it's so valuable. But it does seem like sometimes people, they think that they've created a darling. It's a question of you just don't understand it. Like,
Right.
yeah, I don't understand it because it's not fun.
Yeah. And I think it takes particular guts, the example you used there of a game that you worked on for a long time, and you're cutting not just a part of the game, but the entire game.
Yeah,
that is awesome. Very difficult to do, especially after with the sunk cost of all the time and energy you put into it. But I still learn from those games. I use that information to hopefully make other games better. That is tough to do, and I wish more designers, I wish more publishers would do that as well. Acknowledge, hey, we have a game that works. It is functional. You can play this game, but it is not fun. I think that's important to cut that. Yeah.
Exactly, and you're still going to learn from it anyway. And at least and it seems like the people that I know, or that I've talked to, that seem to be the most, I wouldn't say successful, but like feel the best about themselves, are the ones that are not wedded to any particular game. It's not like their life's work. It's just like, this is a really fun project, and they're getting excitement off of, they're getting the dopamine hits from watching other people play, and finding enjoyment on their on their own, not necessarily that they created the perfect, the thing that was perfect the first time out. And I have ADHD, so the idea of jumping from game to game to game is great. If you say that one's crap, great, I'll just shift to another one, and that's
great.
That works. When it comes to the subject of crowdfunding, in particular, I know that you've obviously used crowdfunding a lot. You've written a book about it. Are there times when crowdfunding is the wrong call in your mind from the perspective of a game designer?
Yeah, I do. And in particular, the way that I'll delineate this is having fun and loving being a game designer, I think, is a very different skill set than an enjoyment set than running a business, which is when you launch a crowdfunding campaign, you are launching a business, even if it's just for one product. And so the main thing I think about when someone is asking about that or pondering that is, which one do you love? And it is okay to love both. I love both. That's why I did both. But some people love to run businesses. Some people love to do game design. And if that Venn diagram happens to coincide, it happens to overlap for you, awesome. Go for both. If not, I think that is an opportunity to submit a game to a publisher and let them do that work. How does it feel for you? Like, where are you feeling with your Venn diagram right now? Are you...
I've never pitched a publisher because I mean, I'm assuming I'm half Catholic, half Jewish, so the amount of guilt and shame that I feel on a daily basis is, off the charts. But I just assume that they're just not going to like it, and they're not going to get it. And so I'd rather just get playtesters or people who seem to like it really jazzed about it. And there's this kind of thing like, well, I want to make it myself, and I want to make a company, and I want to build a brand and build a baby and all this kind of stuff. So so I never really thought about pitching a publisher, but I'd love to know how to, and I'd love to know what publishers think will do well in the market, because then that's something that you can learn as well. And I definitely have met people who were like, no, I'm never going to do a crowdfunding campaign. I'm just working on pitching to publishers because I know what I like and I know what I don't, which I envy that person. But when it comes to publisher and kind of with the publisher hat on, I guess what are the most common things that if I were to want to say pitch to you, what are the most common things that when I do them really pisses you off and makes you less and less likely to want to work with me as a designer or be interested in my game?
I mean, the number one thing, if you were pitching to me, would be if you didn't even look on our website to find if we had a submission page at all.
Yeah.
I know every publisher does it differently. There's no centralized way to do it. But I think that's okay. And I think when someone doesn't use that process, it does not make a good first impression. At all. When they try to find a way around it, when maybe they think that they're the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
that's the number one thing. Look at our process. If we have one, if any publisher has one, and it makes me feel special too. If someone actually uses that process, then we're like, okay, they went out of their way. They chose Stonemaier Games for this. That says something about you, that you thought about us for this game. Yeah.
And in terms of just general approach, like obviously understanding what the publisher publishes and not pitching something that is completely inappropriate. Are there kind of things that once they go through that process that you're just like, this isn't right, and this isn't going to go anywhere, and you might not realize why.
Yeah. There isn't anything typically about gameplay, but there is often something about the person, because when we're considering a game, if it gets to the stage where we have asked for the prototype and we've played it, that is part of the test for sure. We want to see if there's a good foundation there. But then the next part of the test is when I email that designer afterward and I said, hey, we played your game. We really enjoyed this, this, and this. And I usually try to find 3 other things that need some work. And how the designer replies to that feedback is a huge part of the test. Like that is the other half of the test. How will this person accept constructive criticism? How will they respond? Will they get defensive? Will they push back a little bit? I think it's actually good to see a designer push back and be like, hey, like I've tried that. Thanks for sharing that idea, but I tried that. It hasn't worked. This is why. That conversation is a huge part of the process, because I'm not just working with a game. I'm working with a person, and I want to make sure that person is someone that I enjoy working with.
Nice. So don't have a huge amount of time yet left, but I really want to talk a bit about Vantage. And that's the next game that you're designing personally. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So what is it? So what is it about, and what do you envisage for it?
Yeah. I appreciate you asking about this. Vantage has been my pet project for
so far
7 or 8 years. Thanks. Yeah. There's a lot of art in the game. It is a very open world cooperative game. And by very, I mean that you are crash landing on a planet, and you're crash landing on one of 126 different locations on the planet. So it's not like you're starting in the same place every time you play. You're crash landing in a random place, and you're just you're really given the freedom to do what you want. You have a mission that you can try to accomplish with the other players, but you don't have to. You're just given a lot of freedom, and you're given a lot of freedom in movement. Like when you crash land on a location, I've created a full planet where you can move north, south, east, or west from any location. You have the freedom to do that. So it's a game built around giving players open world style of freedom that is typically, I think, seen in more in video games than tabletop games. And I just wanted to see if I could fully embrace that. Oh, and all of this is from a first person perspective too. So I'm looking at a location from the first person perspective. What I can see right now is all that I can see. And other players can't see that. So it's one of these cooperative games with a little bit of limited information. And wherever you landed on the planet is different than where I am. And so you're seeing something else. You can describe that to me if you want to. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
That's cool. The core idea. It's like, as you say, it's like it's cooperative elements of an open world video game, but in a board game experience. That's really looking forward to it.
Thanks.
Jamey, thank you so much for taking some time to share your experience and to geek out a little bit about Quacks of Quedlinburg with me today. If anyone out there would like to find out more about Vantage, you can find Jamey's design diary on his blog on stonemeiergames.com, which you probably are reading anyway. You can also find more about Stonemeier's other games, including Stamp Swap, which is out for pre-order right now. You can find them on Facebook by searching for Stonemaier Games, and Instagram, you can find Jamey with the username @Jamey Stegmaier. Stamp Swap, Stonemeier's latest release, is available for pre-order now, which we're also going to put a link to in the description below. Thank you very much, Jamey, for taking the time and for being so great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I appreciate it.